Fortnite competitive has a huge problem. Loot pools, map changes, and overall game performance are obviously really important, but this issue has been a thorn in Epic's side for a long time, and there might not even be a solution. Any change could result in a massive shift for Fortnite competitive, and if done wrong, it could threaten everything Epic has built over the last 7 years. Now, I know that hypes it up quite a lot, but before we get into that, let's cover some of the other important problems we just mentioned, starting with game performance. Fortnite has always had issues with game performance ever since the beginning. In early tournaments, clips would go viral of huge content creators rubber banding from insane lag in the late game. Obviously, this put off a lot of people from playing or even watching competitive Fortnite. But since then, Epic has put a lot of work into better servers, so something like this would never happen now. Even so, game performance still causes problems for the competitive scene. At the beginning of almost every season, the same comments from pros and casuals always arise. This game feels awful to play. Whether it's input delay, frame rate, or server lag, there's always something off with the game's general performance. In fact, this happens to enough people that over the years, creators like It's Jerian have made bank from settings guide and FPS tutorials. I'm certain if Epic spent more time on preventing this issue, competitive would thrive. Otherwise, every player's first experience of a new season puts them off and leaves a rough first impression. Next up is an issue that has completely screwed over a lot of people's tournaments: map changes. Although this is still a problem now, once again, it was a much bigger problem early on in competitive. Map changes were much more common in Chapter 1, so between tournaments, some drop spots or even entire sections of the map could change in a single update. This can be detrimental to pros, as often their drops are practiced and refined by every minute. Season 8 has the best example of this, where one update, a volcano suddenly covered the entire top right corner of the island. This screwed over any pros that landed at Tomato Temple, Lazy Links, The Block, Wailing Woods, and Containers. Now, being a pro isn't just about being good. It's also about your ability to adapt to whatever's being thrown at you. But when what's being thrown at you is a massive volcano, you can understand the frustration that might cause. In more recent times, Epic has changed tactics, so mid-season map changes don't apply to tournaments, which avoids any pro player falling victim to the storyline. But map changes season to season can still impact competitive, the most obvious example being boss locations. In multiple seasons, boss locations shift from place to place, forcing players that landed at the area in the previous season to leave to a more unfamiliar part of the map. The alternative being trying to secure the drop spot by contesting some of the best players on the region, who are always gunning for the advantage of a mythic or a medallion. Next up, the loot pool. Every player has a preferred loot pool, whether it's more pump-oriented like Chapter 1, a little all over the place like Chapter 2, SMG-oriented like Chapter 3, or perfect like Chapter 4. Either way, every preference is wildly different, and they all have their pros and cons. Snipers can punish overconfidence and poor movement, but they often overpunish people for the smallest mistake and can end someone's game in 2 seconds. Powerful shotguns like the Havoc and the Charge reward a more mechanical and measured playstyle, but they also let people sit in a box and just rely on hitting a 200 pump. Hit scan assault rifles are much easier to use, especially for beginners, but in the hands of a pro, they're far more overpowered than rifles with bullet drop. Pro player Peterbot, widely regarded as one of the best players of all time, has consistently blamed his recent burnout on the state of the loot pool this chapter, specifically his dislike of the Sentinel shotgun and the use of entirely hit scan assault rifles. When your most known professional player has burnout from the loot pool, that might be cause for concern. But on top of that, with the extreme lows of player count Fortnite has gone through this whole season, something must be seriously wrong. Obviously, Epic can't please every single player with the perfect weapons, but some unique changes after a long chapter with extremely similar metas every season could really be what Fortnite needs. And with that, we've made it to Fortnite competitive's biggest problem: Storm Surge. It's a problem people have been attempting to solve for a long time now, but every solution people give comes with its own set of problems. Now, before we try to fix it ourselves, let's make sure we understand the full picture. For competitive Fortnite to continue and thrive, it's all about the viewers. Epic has to ensure that their tournaments are a big enough spectacle to keep them coming. Initially, this wasn't difficult. In 2018, the Celebrity Pro-Am reached just under 2 million concurrent viewers, with the official Fortnite Twitch channel alone reaching 700,000. World Cup solos peaked even higher at 2.3 million. At the time, Fortnite was the single largest name in all of esports, but now that's really not the case. The FNCS Global Championships in 2025, which is now one of the most prestigious tournaments Epic Games hosts, peaked at only 950,000 viewers, less than half of the World Cup. And that's because a lot of viewers have realized something about tournaments just like these. 1/3 of them is really boring. The early game is exciting. Teams that fans have followed since the qualifiers battle it out to alpha up their drop spot and move on to the rest of the game. It's the decider of a lot of beefs and the culmination of weeks of practice, but it only lasts around 5 minutes. The late game is action-packed. Players drop like flies while trying to skillfully navigate moving zones, find refreshes, or battle for height, and the potential for an insane clutch that could be the highlight of the entire thing is at its highest. But again, it only lasts around 5 to 10 minutes. And the mid-game, well, nothing really happens. People sit in towers, or sit in storm, or sit in a box and just wait, really filling you with anticipation, isn't it? And this is what the majority of each game looks like. Needless to say, viewership always tanks in the mid-game. Obviously, Epic needs to find a way to make the mid-game much more enjoyable to viewers if they want to keep people watching. And so far, they've tested out 4 solutions with varying levels of success. The first attempt Epic made we'll call the elimination bonus. During the summer skirmish, Epic offered up a cash incentive for winning a game with a high number of eliminations. In other weeks, it shifted to whoever got the most eliminations in each match. In week 4, this bonus was $50,000, which is a life-changing amount of money to a lot of people. Unfortunately, this can lead to the endgame being much less stacked, since a lot of the lobby would be aiming to W key for the extra prize, leading to either them going down or them taking a decent chunk out of the lobby before moving zones. Also, this method is far too expensive. If Epic offered up the same prize every game in FNCS Globals, they'd be forking over an extra $600,000 in just 2 days. Bearing in mind, the winning trio only received $450,000, and that was split between the 3 of them. So something tells me this one just wouldn't work. The second attempt was the mechanic we all know and love, Storm Surge. If you watch content similar to mine, you'll have heard how Storm Surge works 100 times. So I'm going to do this quickly. If there's too many players alive when zone closes, the teams that have dealt the least amount of damage take 25 damage every 10 seconds until either enough people die or they overtake another team in damage. It can be explained in more detail, but you get the gist. In theory, this would get teams to fight in the mid game to gain more damage, but not so much that the end game is completely dead. Unfortunately, it unintentionally caused teaming, which actually led to 4 pros, Bucky, Creo, Keys, and Slack, being banned for 60 days. In scrims, these pros would practice their drops, and each time they would at some point meet to trade damage with each other before disengaging. They'd then go on to do the exact same thing in real tournaments. This was honestly kinda confusing whether or not it was even against the rules, as there was no agreement between them, but a lot of players still considered it teaming. This was, of course, until it was revealed that literally everyone does it, and now it's just the status quo. All Storm Surge ended up doing was causing teams to stock up on meds, build massive surge towers, and sit in them for half the game. Evidently, still pretty boring to watch. On top of that, it gave players who don't have access to scrims a massive disadvantage, as they'd have to come up with a new way to improvise getting enough surge. The third attempt Epic made was something called Loot Island. Midway through each match, a floating island would spawn at one of a few different possible areas. This island would have some advantages like mythics, healing items, or even just high ground on other players, which would entice players nearby to fight for it and gain those advantages, giving the mid game much more action. But it still had some drawbacks. Even though it spawned in different locations every time, the best players accounted for this and landed at the POIs close to where it would usually spawn. Then it was just a matter of waiting and taking the island once it appeared, completely negating the whole point of the island and giving them an advantage for absolutely no reason. Finally, Epic's most recent solution, which I'm going to call Storm Surge 2.0. It essentially worked the exact same as regular Storm Surge, however the damage dealt would be reduced by any damage taken. So say you dealt 100 damage on a team, then they hit you back for 50, your damage dealt would equal 50. If they then hit you for another 100, your new total would be negative 50. The point of this change was evidently to reduce the amount of pros trading Surge, but this just ended up making mid-game 10 times more boring. Teams would just deal a small amount of damage, then box up and refuse to engage till the end of the game. And because the damage threshold for Storm Surge was so low, they'd be completely fine. Meanwhile, the unfortunate teams who are low on damage have pretty much no chance of gaining any, as every other team is playing as defensive as possible. So any attempt to fight just pushes them further down on damage. So clearly, Storm Surge 2.0 isn't the answer, but with a few tweaks, it could be exactly what Epic is looking for. The best fix I've seen so far is that if you eliminate a player that has dealt damage to you, the damage they dealt should be added back to your total. This lets fighting be a much more viable option while still preventing surge trading. But I'm sure someone in the comments will come up with something that I've completely missed. So what do you think? Have we solved Fortnite competitive's biggest problem, or do you have an even better solution?